Red seeing green's easy score, and I had to get rid of my lighter. I needed it in my break. Bumped a green piece out to prevent them from scoring that area, and moved some of the wagons out into the Midwest where they're bonus. They don't have a double move token, however, so they can't use that. Now, one thing you'll notice, Red's running out of pieces. They're going to have to start selling their cards to keep playing. That's something that's going to happen to everyone, but Red's done a lot of expenditures so far. Probably because of that double move more than anything else. Alright, well, on to whatever Green's going to do. Yellow likes their position, so they scored and paid for their second card for 3 points. So Blue gets 2 for the West. Blue and Red each get 2 for the Midwest. There's an extra wagon down here. The Great Plains, there's no wagons, so Green's big power there doesn't happen. Yellow gets 4 for their eastern holdings. And that seemed like a good choice to me. Red ended up selling a big card for 6 counters. They were unable to play the card they wanted, this one. So no real point to trying to eke along with low amounts of points. So that seemed the best move, and they drew another card for that. Green and Blue made a little bit of an agreement here, of sorts. They both stand to score some decent points. So, Green is offering by putting one of these markers out. If I was my Winsome fans, or friends, not fans, but I would say this was silently generated, you know, and is an offer. And it sort of is. It's saying, look, we can do this. We can both score points off this. It doesn't matter whether or not you can table talk or not. I don't really necessarily hold these conversations in my head completely. Sometimes I might. But let's see what the scoring is for this. Blue grabs 2 out there. Blue grabs 2, red grabs 2, green grabs 1. Okay. Here green grabs 3. And then out here yellow gets a point. And that's a decent score for blue and green. So I'm not sure. I don't know if green played that. Uh-oh. I think green just blew their marker on that, which makes it less of a decent score. Oh well. I done it. I'm just looking at their cards. They don't have enough cards. To have just scored. And they didn't have anything out here before. Well, that probably wasn't worthwhile. But it certainly looks worthwhile to blue, especially now that green spent their card to do that. So blue's going to do the same. And again, 2 points for blue. 2 blue, 2 red, green, 3 green, and a yellow. Blue doesn't have to spend anything or do anything special for that. Of course, both they and green are falling down low, so they may have to sell. So jumping to that lead was somewhat expensive. Well, we've made it around the board for a while without any scoring really happening. We're still stuck here. Again, nobody had that big lead. Green has built one up. Yellow's building up a bunch of tokens to try to grab points. They still have their double move. They figure they might be able to get a jump on everyone if they do that right. Of course, it cost them 6 to trigger their next point score. And they're feeling kind of behind because everybody else has a fairly cheap point score left to them with the 3-pointer. And even green's advantage here. They're sitting on 5 points here, but let's look. Blue gets 3. Green gets another one here. So red gets 3. It's not like you're going to make huge amounts of points off of any of these actions. So that's kind of a disincentive to do anything. One thing that I have to do is I have to reshuffle the deck. It's been depleted. So those cards come back around, and you know, the same actions that were played end up coming back for more plays. Which, in the case of the things that play to the east, those probably will end up just getting sold. But on the other hand, some of the things that went to the west got sold before because they weren't as valuable to the players who were playing them. So I'd say the mix is probably pretty reasonable. So red sold a card, giving green the opportunity to play their victory point card, their 2-pointer. So they did that. They think they're going to come out ahead on this. Blue is going to get 3 over in the west. Over here, red gets 3. Green is next with 2, so they get 1 point. Now here, green scores all 5 wagons, which is pretty much why they did it. And yellow gets 2 over here. And then we go over to blue. I'm going to point out an interesting situation. Blue threw a card for 5 more bucks. They're actually collecting money. They've sold twice now in a row. Just because they don't have cards that look like they'll help them. If they start playing here, they'll start boning into their own point score. They don't have anything, they just got this one, that helps them grow in any other areas. They can move some wagons around. That didn't help at all. So all they could see to do was get some tokens and change their cards, hoping that they fall into a situation where they can score the points that they need. We'll move on to yellow here. So green's got an ugly situation. Their next scoring point card is quite high. Their current position isn't that bad. I think they're going to pay for that rather than play any of these cards. And it's like the board's kind of taking a freezing as people are trying to get money. Green could, of course, draw more money, but why not score the points while they've got them? Sure, it's getting rid of some of their potential later in the turn. That's gotta be green. I don't know whose that is. It's yellow. I see. It's like tiddlywinks. So they're gonna go for another scoring round here. And these 2 go to blue, 1 to red, because they're tied. Here, yellow gets 3, and green gets 1. 1, 2, 3. Here, green gets the full 5, which is really why they're doing it, and yellow gets 2 more. And poor red's getting hosed. Of course, they went for another sale, which doesn't really help their position on the track at all. Yellow just fired off their... they sold a card to get enough money to fire off their double token and get their last victory point thing. We'll see what that comes out. It's 4 points for red. That's okay. Red's not doing very well. Over here, 3 for yellow. Unfortunately, it's 5 for green again, but then 4 more for yellow. So yellow gained a lot of ground on everyone here. And now we go back to red. Blue has collected all their counters, and that kind of explains why they're so far behind. But they still have some cheaper scoring cards than most people. Of course, red does too. So they may be able to make up a lot of ground. Blue looks in much better shape than red does in terms of the combination of counters and what they have in their scoring cards. But red has a little bit better board position, having taken over the Western market. Green's now in kind of an interesting position. They'd like to score. They really would. They'd still get 4 points here. Yeah, yellow's going to gain on them, so they wouldn't want to do it that badly. They don't have enough tokens to do it, though. And they've got to make the decision, do they want to improve their board presence somewhere? Probably over in the east with the cards that they have. Or are they more interested in getting more cash for a later play when they can score. They're probably never going to be in the position where they really, really want to play this card and have the tokens to do it, because it costs so much, and setting up the board presence would cost a lot. Now, one thing to look at, though, is it doesn't really help anyone directly to move pieces into California. It only hurts other people. So maybe Green wants to start developing territory in the West. Of course, the movement doesn't really help them. So I think instead they may sell this big card and get their 5 tokens, just as a little snippet of thought in the game. Or otherwise, I haven't been thinking about, or haven't been discussing too much what other people are doing. On to blue, they're going to have to improve their position. Green gets a new card for that. And we'll move on from there. Gone by with a little bit more maneuvering. The wagon's heading westward. And Red's looking and saying, I don't think it's going to get much better than this. I'm going to score my card and see what happens. Okay, so in the West, Red takes 4 wagons. Blue gets 2. And Green gets 1. Over here in the Midwest, Yellow gets a pair. In the Great Plains, Red gets 1, 2, 3, and then Yellow gets the next 2. And this is a good play for Yellow. They've been in better shape than Green for a while, and thinking, should I spend the 10 just to get that jump? Well, that 10 would really help Red, and we're seeing that Red finally got to the point where they could play. And now Red is not the first here. Green gets 3 there. And that's the one thing I thought Red was. Green just played, I think, in the East. Alright, well, that'll put it over to Green. They'll try to see what they can do, because I don't think they're losing that much, if anything, to Yellow at this point. So if they can kind of maintain that balance, they should be able to push over 50. They're getting pretty close. How many points did they get this last time? About 4, which isn't quite enough. But if they get pushed a little further, they may want to save up and trigger that 10 to see if they can push over. Yellow just did a kind of impressive move. They played an expensive card for them. It drained their cash. But they pulled all the wagons out of the East. Very few left. So Green's current commitment to the East has just been nullified. And that's going to really make it very difficult for Green to get the auto victory here. Meanwhile, they put additional commitment in the West, and they think that's going to be the magic touch to get them over. Of course, they have to worry about the other people like Red and Blue, who have cheap scoring options available, and in Blue's case, a huge quantity of tokens. See how it works out. Another time around, and it looks like people are playing into Yellow's hands, but they didn't have the money, so they had to grab. And now they have only 7 left. Now, can they gain more on everyone? Probably, if nobody touched anything, but they didn't have the double move. They can't do that. So we go on to Red, and we can see what Red can do to try to grab their own chance at it. Well, we're on Red's turn, and poor Blue still hasn't triggered anything, and there's no more wagons coming any further. These are the last wagons here in the Great Plains. Nobody's gone to California yet, but that may start happening. So far, we've just been piling up out here in order to steal from other people as we go earlier. But as we get to here, and this becomes the point maker, maybe people will start pulling them out of there to prevent other people from getting points. I don't know. It's not like anybody's been triggering points. Around another time, still no points have come. Pushed out of the Great Plains now into the Midwest. Yellow and Green are kind of at this. Neither one wants to trigger for the high cost. Not that they can now, but they've been not willing to, because they maybe gave a point more to the other player, or in Yellow's case, even if it just broke even, it's not worth it. if it puts green close to here where they could then finish it off. Red, on the other hand, just hasn't been able to get the score. They hit a lot of points here, and now they've lost those. Blue just hasn't played. That's the biggie that's been going on with them. And I mean, they're sitting here on this. They've got their cheap points, but they haven't been able to trigger something that was clearly to their advantage. All right, let's see what's going to happen. Around again, almost nothing's happened. People have collected money, maybe. The fact that it's down to 2 areas is really playing into green's hands, because they can kind of keep this balance between them and yellow. Right now, yellow could get 1 more point if somebody scores. Blue is doing okay, and they probably will score at some point. They're getting 5 points. That'll give them only a 1-point edge, though, and that doesn't feel like enough. Of course, they could do double scoring. 9, do they have that? They don't quite have that, and even if they did, that seems so weak for the couple of points. So we're back on red again. And yellow, as an example, had to play this card, which moved a wagon. Now, there's still a lot of wagons here, but that chance of a victory is slowly diminishing as they start drifting forward. Once it gets down to 1 space, it'll be almost trivial for green to stay in control, I think. Right now, blue is, again, 1 point ahead of yellow, 2 points ahead of green. They're not going to grab a lot of spaces if they fire one off at this point. Well, blue's in an obnoxious position. They've got the points to fire off and gain on most people. They'd get 5, green would get 2, yellow would get 1. Red will get 6. Red's ahead of blue. However, blue is sitting with a number of their pieces out of the way. They're not going to use a double turn or anything for this, but they are going to fire off a victory point chart. So let's see what we get here. Let's do the Midwest first. Red gets 1, 2, 3. Blue gets 1, 2. And then over here, well, everybody's going to score here. Who's here? That's 3 for blue, 1, 2, 3 for red, and 1 for green. Not a good position to be in, but they want to not be completely humiliated, basically. And yellow's very unhappy about this. And red's making their play for it. They just bought their 6-point card. Things are kind of set up where that stasis might actually start helping red now, because let's count the points. Red gets 3 for this. Yellow gets the other 2. And over here, blue gets 3, and red and green each get 2. Wow. Alright. Well, now green needs to figure out how to get ahead, because it's tough. It really is. And their position isn't great. Where they'd want to be building, well, it doesn't really make a difference which one they build in. But they don't have any tokens. Of course, neither does red. So, well, we've wrapped around again, and there's only 5 tokens here. Right now, if green could trigger a victory point phase, they would win, but they're 5 tokens short from doing that. It's going to be red's turn. They don't have the ability to move many of these tokens. They could trigger the victory point. They have tons of money. They don't particularly want to do that. They don't see much value to most of their cards. So they're just going to dump another wagon off. And we'll get to green. We know green doesn't have the money. If they can pull the money together before 2 more wagons go, but what's the chance of that? I don't know. Well, blue and yellow collected money. That looked like the best thing they could do, so they didn't cause any wagons. Red only had 1 wagon. They didn't have a 2-wagon card. So that leaves us, and they get a replenishment for whatever that mattered. Yeah, that would have done it. That leaves us with green, who has 4, 8, 10 bucks. Enough to trigger a victory point phase. There's 3 green. 1, 2, 3. Green just won the game. was definitely tight. Blue and yellow were out of it at the end, but except for, I mean, it looked like blue and red were out of it at one point. I would have thought blue had the better chance of getting back. So clearly, up until the very end, where it became kind of tedious because it went several rounds around the table before things got settled. But up until that very end, it definitely was a fairly close game. The fact that red could pull up so far behind, they were back with blue without the double piece marker, and yeah, they had some cheap victory point cards. There's no question there, but they were able to bring it to a very, very close finish. Where had they had this card in their hand instead, they would have won. You know, so they had a handful of no wagons. Granted, they had been pushing the wagons pretty hard, so that might affect that quite heavily. All right, I'll come back with a review.